Relationships are tough, and there are a lot of ways to screw it up, and there are limited ways on how to keep it together. That's the focus of this Depraved and Debaucherous. Thanks for being with me. I'm King of Podcasts. So there's a couple of stories that can talk about relationships here. And should I go with the improvements, the things you could do to make your relationships better, or should I go to the bad news on how you could screw it up? Let's go to the bad one. We'll go with that first, and then we'll finish on a high point. Okay, how about that? How to ruin your relationship in 5 simple steps. Now, I talked about this on a previous episode not too long ago, about how people often sabotage relationships with destructive behaviors that, when reversed, can lead to greater intimacy. And that partners need to feel free to be themselves to have a long relationship. And being jealous of one spouse as having friends is self-defeating. So there's that part we talked about before. But I leave that in the description if you want to take a look at it for yourself. But then there's also something that you could do about killing your relationship. And it's all about one word they say here about being a relationship killer. So let's go and bring that up. About your word choice and how it impacts your satisfaction, actually. So in this point, they say that all couples are prone to toxic thoughts lurking in their minds and coming out in hurtful ways. Managing those, including negative, rigid shoulds, is crucial for healthy relationships. And to manage toxic sholding, we're going to talk about that in a moment, is disputing the thoughts with more supportive, positive, encouraging ones. So now, let's talk about one particular counseling session that this writer, Dr. Jeffrey Bernstein, who wrote the book Liking the Child You Love, he tells this story. During a counseling session, he speaks with Gladys, heavily focusing her frustrations about her boyfriend, Antonio. Quote, "We have been together for 3 years and he should want to take things to the next level. He should know that I want to get a place together, get married, and have kids. Yet all he does is act like a kid himself. He should know better." And then he says that the word should pops up liberally as Gladys describes her concerns. Consistent with the tenets of cognitive behavioral therapy, should engenders a controlling judgmental dynamic. Thinking should about someone you love or being on the receiving end of a should creates negativity and resentment. You should be like this, or you should be doing this. You should always be doing this. Right. Using the word should can take a toll on relationships. If partners harbor internalized, hidden toxic thoughts, couples therapy that focuses on reflective listening drills may not expose these empathy depleting thoughts. So another example he uses here is Jerome's express versus inner dialogue with his partner, Sherry. He says, a verbalized request, "Can you please help me declutter our apartment?" Underlying toxic thought, right? "She shouldn't be leaving as this is an impossible, self-centered hoarder." I don't know why they put it like that, but they did. So he keeps thinking that if they're living together, that if she doesn't keep the house clean and doesn't keep it kind of tidy and orderly, that he's just not going to say anything about it. He's just going to keep it bottled up and explode later. But what this psychologist is saying is that it's better for Jerome to be willing to manage his toxic shoulding on Sherry. And he says that he should challenge his thinking by actively disputing his thought. If he can detoxify his thoughts about her, he may now bring more healthy, supportive thoughts about her, such as this, where Jerome might say, "Sherry brings me a lot of joy and loves me deeply. Rigidly and disrespectfully expecting her to be a neater is not fair. It will help me to remind myself that she is still a very nurturing mother, is really sweet to my family, and a great cook." So yeah, expecting not perfection, but at least the best you're going to get, or the best somebody can be for you. And that's how relationships are, is that give and take, that you're not going to get somebody that is exactly the way you want, unless you're trying to be a narcissist and you're trying to create that, which you shouldn't, but some people might do that. Reflective listening is great, Dr. Bernstein says, especially if it follows self-reflection. And then he also says that we need to Acknowledge that many toxic thoughts begin with should, even if we think we're going to do so in the privacy of our own minds. These thoughts can manifest in our tone or actions, leaving a partner experiencing a different word that begins with sh or shame. But if you can replace your shoulds with would likes, many toxic thoughts can be avoided. So instead of saying, you should know how I feel, try thinking and saying, I would like you to please hear me out on this. Instead of, you shouldn't bring that up, try thinking and saying, I would like to consider what you are saying. Please let me sit with it for a little while before I respond. So what they're trying to say here is, it's even in that level of argument or conversations where, well, you always do this and you always do that, when you should do this and you should do that. It's that kind of feeling of expectations, of which you can have expectations, but if they're not going to be met, if they might be kind of sort of met, that might be another story. But expectations in a relationship, that is something that hurts right here. And shoulding, shoulding, is a very common component. And that's what they're talking about here. So get rid of the shoulding, because we want to be having more time to be depraved and debaucherous.